Hello, welcome back. We are talking about confidence intervals again today. So what we did in the last section is we used a confidence interval to estimate the population mean. And if you remember, so a confidence interval is a range of numbers. Since we often take a sample and take our X bar of that sample, our sample mean, to be a point estimate of our population mean, a more likely way to estimate the mean is the population mean is to use a range of numbers instead of a single point. And so that's what a confidence interval is. And if you noticed in some of our homework problems, well, in all of them, they give you a sigma value. They give you a population standard deviation, which I think is a little strange because if you didn't know the population mean, why would you know the population standard deviation? It's a great question. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what if you don't know that population standard deviation, which I think is a more likely scenario. So when we don't, and all we have is our sample, we use a different kind of distribution to estimate this population mean, and it's called a t distribution. It's a lot like a z distribution. So what we've been doing up until now, our standard normal curve looks like this, and these guys down here are z values. Mean, median, mode, all in the middle. It's symmetric. The area under the curve is 1. These are all properties of this standard normal curve. Well, a t distribution is very similar. It's still got mean, median, mode in the middle. It's still symmetric. The area under the curve is still 1, but the tails are a little bit different. So let's take a look at this picture. The blue line right here is our standard normal curve with z-scores. The gray and the black line are both t distributions. Now, why is there more than one? Because t distributions are what we call a family of curves, and the curves change slightly depending on what your sample size is. So the bigger your sample size, the lower your tail is going to get to the axis. So this is a smaller sample size, and this is a bigger sample size. And see the distance it is away from the axis right here. That's a smaller distance than this. So that's the main difference between a t and a z distribution is the tails are fatter. They're higher up and away from the axis. Now, how do we dictate which one of these curves to use? We do that by calculating what we call the degrees of freedom. And we calculate that by calculating n minus 1. So it's 1 less than the sample size. Okay, and that's going to dictate which of these curves is used. And then that's going to give you a t value. And then the formula for these confidence intervals is very similar to the one I showed you yesterday, only it's using a z value instead of a t value. Okay, and it's also using a sample standard deviation rather than a regular standard deviation. So let's take a look at where these are on the calculator. On ClassCalc, you're going to go in the same menu option, Stat. Then we're going to go into Tests. And right here, we see T interval instead of this was yesterday's was Z interval. And so this is T interval. We type that in and it tells you what you're going to enter. This is X bar, that's your sample mean. S, that's your sample standard deviation. N, that's your sample size. That's going to dictate which T curve we use. And then your confidence level. And it works exactly the same way as our other ones did the other day. If let's say your sample mean is 36, your standard deviation is 2, your sample size is 40, and you want a 90% confidence interval. There it is, between 35.4, 36.5, and this is your margin of error, 0.53, okay? On the TI, it's also very similar. You're going to go to your same menu, which is we're here in Stat now, and you're going to go over to Tests. And your first option was we went all the way down yesterday to number 7 is Z interval. If you keep pushing the arrow button down, there's more menu options that you can't see. The one below this is option 8. And that is T interval. All right. And when you hit that, you get your screen comes up. It says X bar, S sub X, that's the sample standard deviation, your N value, your C level. So it's just the same once you get into there as class calc. Okay. And that's all. That's really it. It's a pretty simple, just choose the next menu option, fill in what they ask for. It still works the same way as other confidence intervals do. If I'm on a number line and I have my interval here, the middle is going to be my X bar value. This distance from here to the endpoint is going to be E, and this distance here is also going to be E. So if you were given an interval and ask for your X bar, you can just find the middle. If you're given an interval and ask for the error, you can take that distance between the middle and the endpoint. So all of that works the same once you have your interval. What I do want to show you is how to handle the situation when you're given some data, which happens in these problems, because so often we're doing these confidence intervals and all we have is raw data because these operate solely off of samples. So let's take a look at an example. This is a bunch of data. It's SAT scores. This is a sample of 12. And the directions say to find a couple things: sample standard deviation, sample mean, and then it says construct a 99% confidence interval. So we're going to start with the confidence interval and then we'll go from there. So my C level is going to be 0.99. So on class calc, what you're going to do is first you need to enter your data into a list. So I know this is a while ago because this was back in chapter 2. The way you do a list is you have to name it a letter. I always name it A. So I'm going to tap and hold the 7, and that's going to give me an A. If you tap and hold the 8, you can see right here, that's going to give you a B. Tap and hold the 9, it gives you a C. You can name it anything you want. Hit your equal sign. And then the other thing is you have to have these square brackets, not the round ones for a list. So you're going to tap and hold that parenthesis. Okay. And then we're going to enter the data in. So hang with me for a minute. I'm going to grab this data and I'm going to enter it. And maybe you could do that while I'm doing it too, because I want you to show you how this works. So we've got 1700, and then you're putting commas in between. 1940, 1510, 2000, 1430, 1870, 1990, 1650, 1820, 1670, 210, and 1380. Okay, so that's your list. Now you tap down on the next line and we're going to go through this confidence interval option. So I'm going to go into stat. I'm going to go tests, and I'm doing a T interval. But now look at this toggle switch right here. This says stats and this says data. Stats is like, I tell you what the sample standard deviation is. I tell you what the sample mean is. Data is, I give you data. So if you got a big list of numbers, you're going to want to hit that button and look at how this changes now. Now they're only asking you for 2 things. Why? Because they're going to use this data to calculate the things that are missing, the sample standard deviation and the sample mean. So what they want to know is that L stands for what's your list. And if you're ever unsure what the abbreviations mean, tap the little question mark right here, and it tells you L is your list of values. Okay, so I go, well, what did I name my list? My list is A. So I'm going to type A, tap hold the 7, and that's going to be my data set. And then it wants my confidence level. And this one was asking me for a 0.99 confidence level. And that's going to be my interval for the SAT scores. Okay, so let's flip back here. My confidence interval is going to be you know what's happening right now? I don't have my glasses on and I can't see the numbers. So I might write these down wrong. 1537.92 to 1990.42. I think that's right. Okay, that's your confidence interval. If you want to know what X bar is, you can do it a couple ways because this is also asking for sample standard deviation and sample mean. I think the easiest way is to go back here to your class calc and next line down. Oh, actually, this is the easiest way right here, X bar and S. This is your mean and your sample standard deviation. But I do want to remind you of this. If you go down one row, remember when we hit stats and then we do basic right here is mean, median, mode, range, standard deviation, all of that kind of stuff. So if you do want to just calculate those independently, that's all there. You can use that if you choose. All right, TIs. Let's go over here. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to hit stat and we're going to enter a list. So again, I know we've done this, but it's been a long time. So hit stat. And then the first thing that comes up is edit. And that's what you want to do is hit edit. And this throws you into your lists. So it says L1, L2, L3. If you have numbers coming down here, then what you want to do is use your arrow buttons to highlight your L1. Then you push clear and the down button. And that's how you clear the numbers. If you highlight L1 and hit DEL for delete, you'll delete the whole list, including L1. So you just want to hit clear and the down button. Then you're going to enter your numbers, no commas for you guys. Okay, just your list, hit enter after every number. Once you have that entered, you go back and hit stat. And now you go over to test and down to option 8, which is T interval. And now when you do that, you also have a toggle button at the top. The first one at the top says data and stats. You want to come over here and highlight data, and you have to push enter to get the black box to move over on data. And then you'll see it says, hey, what's your list? That's your first question, is what's your list? And I entered mine in L1. So L1 is going to be second function 1. That's that blue L1 right there. Frequency, you can disregard, just leave that. That's for a different section. And then your C level, that's going to be 0.99. And then you can calculate and it'll give you your interval. Okay. Also for you, I want to remind you that if you need your mean, sample mean, and sample standard deviation, that is in second stat in calculate. And under calculate, the first option is 1 var stats. You hit that and it asks you which list. You put list 1, hit enter, and it'll kick out all that information with your sample mean, sample standard deviation. So that's where you can find those. And that, my friends, is all for section 6.2. I will see you next time.